have realized that, yeah, absolutely, that it's linked, and that the story, our own menstrual story, so, how we got to where we are in terms of the red thread, and, what significant moments in our life, in terms of, menstruation, in terms of, whether we become mothers or not, and all of those really significant life events. It's so linked. And then when I was reading the work of the wonderful Jane Hardwicke Collins on menstrual shame, it's like, okay, this is the same stuff. This is the same. The mechanism of the shame is the same.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. Today's conversation is with client and good friend of mine, Hannah Brown. Hannah is a cycle coach. She's also a social worker who works with children, and she's also a trainer and consultant who works with professionals to know how to support children. From her experience of doing life story work, where she supports children to understand what's happened to them and to know that things have not been their fault, and to explore these dynamics of their lived experiences, Hannah has taken this modality and uses it to support women to tell their menstrual stories, which is really about looking at what's happened, where you have been, and how you've got to where you are today in terms of your relationship with your body, your cycle, and yourself. And she holds space for women through cycle coaching to begin to unpick these threads of these stories, to reject menstrual shame, and to help women to reclaim their cycle. This conversation was really, really gorgeous. It was like nattering with an old friend. And we spoke about Hannah's journey from being a social worker to becoming a menstrual cycle coach, what life story work is as a healing modality for children, and how she then applied that to help women to reclaim and tell their menstrual stories, and how she powerfully helps women as a cycle coach. She talks about her recent workshop that she did in her daughter's school about periods for kids who are aged 10 to 12. And she tells us what she did and how it went and what went down, and the goss on what worked and what didn't. And that was just so inspiring, hearing about really why we need to be supporting children right at the start of their menstrual journeys, so they don't have these big stories and journeys to unpick and heal. And we talked a bit about my upcoming vision quest with the School of Shamanic Womancraft, and Hannah's time with me in Cycle Sorcery, and so much more. So sit back with a cuppa and sink into this great conversation. This is perfect for anyone who's a cycle coach, a space holder, a menstrual educator, who's also a person who really wants to understand their own cycle more too. And if you're looking for support with this, make sure that you connect with Hannah over on her Instagram. She's at womb__wisdom. Hannah Brown, welcome to Wildflow. How are you today?
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks for having me. I'm honoured to be here. I'm good. Yeah, I am good today, actually, on this rainy, wet Welsh morning of a Tuesday morning. Yeah, it's pretty grim out there, but I'm warm and snuggly inside. So
It makes it all right, doesn't it? Being warm and snuggly inside. It can be as cold as it wants outside, but you're inside all tucked up. Yeah. So let's start with a cycle check-in. If we just carry on, I'll ask you to go first, if that's okay. Just carrying on from what you've said about, the season that you're in and, around you in Wales. Where in your cycle are you, and how does that feel for you today? In that wet, cold
Mm.
Welsh autumn morning.
That's a great question. Yeah. So I'm cycle day 2. So I'm firmly in my inner winter. Um, and actually I was thinking about it earlier, and I'm feeling quite kind of slow and quite kind of heavy. Day 2 is like usually the heaviest day of bleeding for me, but
Mm.
it's okay. It's like manageable at the moment. And I feel like a little bit floaty, but quite connected to myself, which is quite nice. Um, it was a real relief to start bleeding yesterday because I'd had a bit of a longer cycle this cycle. So that, yeah, I'm kind of happy. I'm happy in my inner winter, and yeah, I've got my slippers on. I mean, basically, life is better with slippers on, isn't it? So I'm kind of cooched up, like warm and cozy in my house in my winter. Happy that I'm not outside. So yeah.
Oh, thanks for sharing. That sounds like I really can feel the energy of where you're at. Day 2, heavy day, but you're a bit dreamy and floaty, but really connected to
Mm,
yourself too, and
mm,
happy to be bleeding after a long cycle. Yeah.
mm.
Yeah,
What
thank
about
you.
you?
Yeah,
Where are
I'm
you
on
now?
day, where am I? I've just had it. I'm 18 or 19. I'm just at
Hmm.
that point, and um I feel like I've forgotten now. 14, 15, 16, 17, I'm day 19. Um, doesn't really matter though, does it? Whether it's the 18th or 19th, but
No.
I've sort of always sort of know whereabouts I am, even if I don't know the exact number. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, this is early autumn. I've just shifted. I think I ovulated quite late this cycle. Most definitely. I thought I was ovulating, and then it kept going, and I thought, oh, this is a juicy summer. It just seemed to kind of that energy just lasted. So um, yeah, following all the signs, it looks like I've ovulated a few days later than normal, so it might well be a longer cycle.
Mm.
So just shifting into autumn, feeling tired today. I had a late night last night. We had a Cycle
Mm.
Sorcery call, but then I didn't go to sleep straight away after that. I was buzzing after that. It's like, oh. And so by the time I fell asleep, it was pretty late. And so I'm in that mix of tired, but also when I really sit down today, I've not worked very much at all. But when I have, it's been like, like hyper productive, and just getting shit done. And it feels like a real kind of just wiping things off my list a bit. I've got this
Mm.
real sense of to get this done and get that done and get that done, and then push it out of the way and forget. And I'm about to have 10 days completely offline as well. So I'm going on the vision quest for the School of
Mm.
Shamanic Womancraft journey next in week. So it's Tuesday now. I've got about 6 days to go, and I've really got to just get everything at home with the family and for work, and all the things completely just sorted before I go, because I'm going to be completely offline, which I actually can't think when the last time I've been completely and utterly, totally uncontactable. Not like, oh, I just turn my phone off. Like, even if I turn my phone on, there's nothing. So it's given me a little bit of anxiety because I'm leaving 3 small children with, my husband who's very capable, but they are wild children. And yeah, it's just like, okay, this is going to be an experience. So there's also that sense of needing to kind of get things done and before I can just switch off and just let what happens happen. Long answer
Wow.
today, but that's how
No,
I'm
I love
feeling.
that. And I'm
Mm.
thinking, where will you be in your cycle when you're on the vision quest then? Because it sounds like you're kind of, will you be in winter?
I so we're going to have 3 days camping, where we're going to be in circle and doing. See, it's all a mystery. It's a mystery school, so we don't know. But
Mm.
from what the little bits I do know, we're going to have 3 days of processes, and we open our circle. We do a lot of ritual. It's it's amazing. So we'll be doing all of these circles and then these processes to kind of let go and prepare for this vision quest. And then, so I think it's the fourth day we go out on the vision quest for 3 days and 3 nights, and it's a water fast as well. Well, and you have to carry all your stuff with you to your site. And that might be, 1-2 kilometers over the bushland. So you have to carry everything you're taking with you. Well, I'm going to be day one, the day this happens. So, I've had a little bit of like, oh gosh, what does that mean? I'm going to be bleeding and hungry, and it's all part of that unraveling, I think, and letting go. But yeah, it's going to be new moon as well, so we'll be camping in pitch black and bleeding and vision questing. So going to be, it's like all these compounding, very inward, dark, wintry new moon energies. So it's gonna, yeah, that's gonna be quite the experience, I think. We
Got
will
your
see. I
average
will
mini
report
break.
back.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear all about it. It sounds and how amazing that that's lined up with your inner winter. Actually, I reckon that's quite potent.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it. If it was, I think they normally do it on full moons, but we've had to reschedule because of COVID in the past. So if I was ovulating and it was full moon, that'd be a really intense energy, like no one to talk to, can't go anywhere, you're stuck in your one spot in your tent. You literally have to just face whatever comes up for you. I think that would be really, really challenging. And I feel in many ways that a new moon bleed time might be gentler. I think it could be really restful, but who knows? We will see. So, exciting.
It is really exciting.
Yeah, I'll have to report back on the other side. So, Hannah, it's so good to have you here on the podcast. So, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. So, just a bit of background for everybody how Hannah and I know each other. So, how did we meet, Hannah, originally? I think we were connected online, maybe. Just I'm not
Maybe I
sure.
think maybe I was stalking you. That sounds really weird, but I think I was following you, and then I think you'd posted about Cycle Coach, and I think
Mm,
I reached out to ask you some questions,
mm.
and you voice noted me back, and I was like, oh, okay, and gave me some fab answers, and then we've just kind of stayed in touch, haven't we? And that was like well over a year ago, actually. Now,
That sounds right. Yeah. And then
hmm.
you've applied and you've been on Cycle Coach this year with Claire Baker's school. And I've been a mentor on that, and we've got to journey on that together as
Hmm.
well, which has been really cool. But I think it's so nice to, yeah, I think we've just been drawn to each other on Instagram, haven't we? And it's gone from
Mm-hmm.
there. And then recently you've been in Cycle Sorcery, which is the group journey that we've been doing together. And it's been just so nice to spend that time with you as well. So yeah, it's just it feels like just a beautiful conversation with a good mate. So yay. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, oh well, I feel the same, and I'm honored to be here. And yeah, Cycle Coach has just been something else. It's really hard to put it into words, actually, isn't it? What it gives you.
Mm.
It's been like I always find I hate it when people say, "Oh, it's been life changing," because you're like, "Oh, loads of things change
Feels
your
like such a
life."
cliche, doesn't
It
it?
feels so cliched, but I can't at the moment think of a better way of describing it. But yeah, it has been instrumental in so many things. And then having the opportunity with you to deep dive even further in Cycle Sorcery has just felt so like, yeah, perfect. I feel that maybe it was all planned. And I just didn't realize and followed those threads.
Mm.
Because yeah, Cycle Sorcery has just been, well, it still is. We're nearly at the end. So
I know. Wow.
basically we're all just boss witches, aren't we? That's what we've learned, that we're all witches and boss witches at that. So
Boss
yeah, I'm
witches.
loving it. Yeah.
Yeah. To quote Jane Hardwicke Collins.
To quote Jane Hardwicke Collins.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, yeah, it's so good. Mm. Yeah, I've loved that. That's a whole. Yeah, I feel really sad that we're nearly done, but it's been so potent as well. I've absolutely loved it. So, oh, yeah. So tell us, Hannah, tell us a bit about yourself. So who's Hannah? Who's Hannah in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do in the world?
That's a great question. Um, and actually one that kind of links to what it is I do, in that I'm a qualified social worker. So I've got kind of two hats, I guess, but they're like interchangeable in lots of ways, that the hats. But yeah, I'm by qualification, I'm a social worker, and a proud social worker, actually. I feel really strongly about the potential for social work to enable change, which is kind of the point of it, really. There's loads of branches of social work, but I'm currently working in a training role. So, training foster carers, social workers. So, it's specifically focusing on children who are in out of home care. So, fostering, adoption, kinship care, special guardianship. And it's really interesting. And I've kind of got there by working in social care for a really long time, uh, and always really been interested in working with children looked after. I think partly because when I was a kid, I was raised by a social worker, actually, and used to go to a childminder who was also a foster carer. And so I was kind of like brought up with kids in care. So I was always really aware that like not all kids had lived with their mums and dads. So I guess it's not really a surprise that that's kind of the group of children that I ended up working with. And I've kind of sidestepped out of practice in the last couple of years in terms of training, but where my specialism is, and where my passion is, and the stuff that really lights me up is supporting professionals to talk to children about what's happened to them. So kids who can't live at home, and that's life journey work. And I mean, I could talk about that all day, but that's the thing that I train on quite a lot. So talking to social care professionals, so unqualified and qualified workers and foster carers and adopters and basically anybody who will listen about how we talk to children looked after about what's happened to them. And actually, we're really, really bad at it because we are frightened about telling them the truth. We're frightened about triggering them. And we're quite often, we don't really understand ourselves. So instead of saying, we don't know at the moment, or these are the things we do know, we just say nothing. And the consequences of that are so enormous of when we say nothing, because actually what happens is kids fill in the gaps with magical thinking, and they inevitably, without a plausible explanation, blame themselves. And that's where this whole thing about blame and shame, I'm really fascinated in, because actually what we know is that when anybody internalizes blame, that has really detrimental impacts on physical and emotional health and on our identities. If we think that the reason that we can't live at home with our families is because something that we did, or that we're unmanageable or unlovable or unwanted, that's really difficult for us then to form a really positive sense of self and have a positive relationship with ourselves and other people and the world. So I'm really fascinated about that, and I'm really committed to supporting professionals to understand that the real key thing for kids to understand is it's not their fault what's happened to them. And quite often it's not their family's fault either. And so it's about that narrative about how do we help kids understand that, if we're going to kind of keep that as the main thread. So that's my kind of the one hat. And then it inevitably relates to the other hat in that um, since becoming a cycle coach and since like I've been exploring quite deeply menstruality over the last year or so. But I came to this work probably longer than that, like 4 or 5 years ago maybe, um, when I read Maisie Hill, Period Power, and had one of those like, oh my gosh, like a proper aha moment of how did I get this old and not know this stuff about my body? Like, what? Like, just literally could not understand how we know so much about so much and so little about the bodies that we inhabit. I just was like, my mind was blown. And I started sharing the book with like all my girlfriends and was like, read this, oh my gosh, read this. So then when the opportunity to train as a cycle coach came up, I kind of didn't, like I absolutely knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't really know where it was going to take me. So I was playing around in this kind of hinterland between these two modalities, these like two places, this like cycle coaching and this stuff about wellness and our nourishing our menstrual ecosystems. And then at the same time, I was doing my day job and was like, I thought that there's definitely something in here, and have realized that, yeah, absolutely, that it's linked, and that the story, our own menstrual story, so, how we got to where we are in terms of the red thread, and, what significant moments in our life, in terms of, menstruation, in terms of, whether we become mothers or not, and all of those really significant life events. It's so linked. And then when I was reading the work of the wonderful Jane Hardwicke Collins on menstrual shame, I was like, okay, this is the same stuff. This is the same, that I'm not saying that everybody who menstruates can be compared to children who are looked after who have had developmental trauma. But the mechanism of the shame is the same. So I'm really, really fascinated in, and I've started to support clients in terms of unpicking that and supporting them to kind of explore and uncover their menstrual story, to unpick and to challenge that menstrual shame in order to reclaim their story, their cycles, their bodies, and a new relationship with themselves. Because that's what I've done. And I just think it's so powerful. That was a really long answer.
I'm like, oh, Hannah, like major work. It's such incredible work. What a powerful body of work to bring those two modalities and that understanding together as the bridge, like you said. Like, I love the way you described it. It's the hinterland between these two pieces of work that you do. And you're so right that, unpicking our menstrual shame that we all have, and it's all within us, whether we think it or not. Even if you think, oh, I've got no shame, like, oh no, like you do, because we all do, because it's so around us, even if it's not within us. And then we just cannot help but integrate that on some levels. And yeah, I just, I think when we do this work of really looking at where we've been and how it's impacted us and how it's shaped us and what we've taken on board, and then how that informs the way we see the world, in relation to bleeding and having a menstrual cycle. It's massive work. It's really deep work, but it's such important work. And I really recommend that, because I feel like this is, it's going obviously different, but to some degree, there's similarities here between what we do very much in the first moon training. And it's, in order to role model and to hold space for others. And like, if you're a parent, I really feel like if you're a mom and you've got children who are growing up, and you want to give them an empowered experience, you've really got to look at your own stuff first to be able to do that, because it's really got its like, its claws in us, really, in deep ways that we're not even conscious of. I'd love to hear more, Hannah, about what story work is, life story work. You mentioned that, just like what that is, and what, if you could just explain it to us a bit more. I'd love to hear, that, and then how you apply it to this menstrual cycle work. It's fascinating.
Okay, yeah, of course. So life story work in its like essence is narrative work. So it's about there's this it's being supported to link your past with your present in order that builds a bridge to your future. And I think we can really overcomplicate it. And what I see professionals doing all the time is they think it's like therapy or like therapeutic. Well, it's the benefits are therapeutic, but they think it's like really specialist and that they can't do it. And so then nothing gets done. But effectively, it's a process rather than an event that where we support people to understand what's happened to them. And particularly for children looked after, that's fundamental because that forms part of their identity. So it's that there's so many layers to it. It's really fascinating because it's got links to attachment theory. So, that's a huge topic, but essentially, if you've had a secure attachment, then, I'm not an expert on this, I'm attachment aware rather than an attachment expert, that if you've been afforded a secure attachment, so if you've had primary caregivers who have been responsive and attuned to your needs, and this is really like a really oversimplified version, but you trust yourself, others, and the world, and you can rely on yourself, and relationships are predictable, and the world is a safe place. And on the opposite end of that, if you haven't had that experience and you have an insecure attachment, the opposite is true. So you don't trust yourself. Relationships with others can be unpredictable, and the world is quite frightening. And so understanding that and having the ability, obviously as children, we wouldn't say, I think Johnny, what you've had is an insecure attachment. You would phrase that I always say Johnny. I don't actually know any kids that I've worked with called Johnny. Maybe that's why I always use the word Johnny as a like pseudonym for all children looked after. But you might say to Johnny, it was really difficult, Johnny, for your mum to give you everything you needed, even though she really wanted to and loved you, because she wasn't given the skills, or she wasn't taught how to do that. You might say that. So there's like ways of saying that and ways of helping kids to understand that. Because if your internal working model, which is like a psychological term to describe your relationship with yourself and your identity and the way you absorb messages about yourself from other people, from the world, and it's a really interesting idea because it's open to change. So I think that this is where it's really linked to menstruality, in that if we can be supported to explore and dissect and uncover and kind of challenge the beliefs that we've been raised with, and whether those are from our family, from ourselves, from society, or all of the above, then we can start to pick apart the version of ourselves that we're confronted with. And actually, that's like some of the real key components of coaching, isn't it, in terms of really examining our beliefs and what we think about ourselves and our relationship with ourselves, and in order to build a new and different relationship with ourselves, really. Does that make sense? I feel that last bit was a bit waffly. So I guess it is its essence, life journey work and menstrual story work is about forging a new relationship with yourself based on uncovering what's gone on in the past, in order that you can go forward in an empowered, knowledgeable way.
I want to interrupt this episode with an invitation for you to come and download your free gift, 12 magical rituals to nourish your menstrual cycle. This guide features 12 rituals, all beautiful practices, rituals, and gorgeous experiences you can give yourself in each of the 4 phases of your cycle in a winter, spring, summer, and autumn to help you to come back into beautiful, loving, nurturing, empowering relationship with your body, your cycle, and your wild feminine power. Come and download it now from my website, www.charlottepointeau.com/free gift. I've heard Jane Hardwick Collins talking about something, the way she's described some work that we've been doing on this 4 seasons journey, I guess, is looking back at, it just reminds me of looking back at patterns and beliefs that we might have had, and reaching that point of being able to see the way that things have been playing out. And then she describes it as you either keep taking this wounded path, the way that it's always been and the way that's been affected by the past, or if you're at a crossroads, you can choose again and take this healed path. And kind of learn from the past. It just really reminded me of that when you said that. Does it feel a bit like that in a way for you?
100%, yeah. And I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it. And she's so wise, isn't she? Yeah, and I guess the stuff that actually that really resonated with me that Jane was talking about, and I think we've talked about this in Cycle Sorcery as well, is when she talks about if you reject your menstrual cycle, then you reject your body. And if you reject your body, then you reject yourself. And I guess that there's links there in that if you don't have access to your story or your history, then effectively you have to reject those bits of yourself. So for me, the word that I think unites all those things is reclamation and like reclaiming. But yeah, absolutely. I think as well, the reason that people aren't brilliant at supporting kids with life journey work, and the same reasons that we avoidant or a bit frightened about doing our own inner work, is that it's sticky and it's hard. And as you know, and I know, because we are facing like regularly our own selves, messy, complex, sticky selves, because you've got to do the work, because you can't show up and support other people to do that unless you're doing it yourself. But it's not easy. And as you were talking then, I was thinking of some examples of like from clients that I'm working with at the moment, and actually from my own experience, about it's really confronting. And actually even though I know that this is like really powerful and deep and not easy work, I've still been quite surprised at how quickly you can get underneath stuff. You know, and we've been doing this, haven't we? With menstrual story work, that you quite quickly, people think, you know, I did some practice sessions with a friend recently, and she was like, well, I thought I was coming to talk about periods. And we ended up like exploring the links between her menarche and what was happening in that time of her life, and how that maybe shows up in that part of her cycle. Or another client that I'm working with at the moment, who very quickly has made a link between something that's happened in her past and her family kind of set up, and the type of birth and contraception that she's chosen, and why those things are linked. So it's endlessly fascinating and exciting. I think, to be able to infuse that narrative work really into menstruality.
Yeah, as you were talking and explaining that, it's become really clear for me now what you're really talking about, and that's the stuff that I get really excited about too. It's like, I think of it, always think of as cycle coaching as being, I have to explain to people like, yes, we're going to be talking about your period and like what it's like and how you experience your cycle. But I feel like your menstrual cycle is such a portal inwards to go, like to dive deep down into all the layers underneath of how you feel about yourself. And like you were saying, all those dimensions of who you are right here and now and how you show up and express yourself and engage with the world and engage with yourself and all of those things. It's so that comes from childhood, doesn't it? It's those formative years. But when you look at it in relation to your menstrual cycle, like you say, it's those rites of passages, how you've experienced your first period that shapes you. We know that shapes us all for life, basically. In terms of, like you say, a relationship with our body. And I love that quote that you shared of that we've both heard Jane say about, if you reject your cycle, you would reject your body and therefore yourself. It's just, for me, it's like little brain explosion of like, yes, it's that it sounds simple, but it's and it kind of is, but it's so profound. Yeah.
And I think as well, the link when you were talking then about like rites of passage and transitions, that our early experiences influence how we will manage transitions. So, I think that's the other really interesting thing, isn't it? That if we've been fortunate enough to have, really secure attachments, and we have a really positive view of the world and we're secure and resilient, then it's going to be much easier for us to manage those transitions. And, the opposite is true. And so I think it's impossible to overstate the significance of our early experiences on the rest of our lives. But it's the opportunity you're right, to stop and pause and reflect and like anchor down into that. And I mean, you do menstrual story work, actually.
As you're describing it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's okay, yeah.
Yeah, you do. You can definitely say that now, that you can add that onto your bio, Charlotte. You can have it. You can say, Hannah says yes, and actually I do menstrual story work. You do. That is what you do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way at all, but yeah, I think that's the way that I work, I guess. It's that looking at that deeper stuff. Well, it's so fascinating. And Hannah, do you do this with children around their menstrual cycles? I mean, you were obviously at the start of their menstrual story, but how is, I know that you've just recently done a session with children in school and you're really passionate about supporting children with their, to understand their cycle and their bodies and to start on the right foot, as it were. Tell us about that. Tell us about how you've been going about that. And share with us.
Okay. Actually, as you started saying about supporting children, I had this feeling in my tummy, this like, because that I just felt, and I'm sure you get that too, because of your first Bloom Circle stuff. I just think I'm so inspired by the power of what you share there. Because I think that all the stuff about menstrual story work is, absolutely fascinating and necessary for women and adults. But actually, you've got the opportunity to change that narrative and to flip the script with kids. And I've worked with kids most of my working life, and recently had the privilege, and it was such a privilege to go and deliver this workshop in my daughter's class, so year 6 primary.
Amazing.
And I'll be honest, it was one of the best things I've ever done in my career. Honestly, I just loved it. I just think the potential of getting in at that stage, as you know, is just so exciting and so necessary. actually. And if you can change the way that young girls feel about when they're on the precipice, when they're about to step onto this path, is like, that's life changing. That's like where you can really change lives. And I actually got this sense that, without overstating my importance or the kind of impact of this session, I really felt that definitely a couple of those girls, it was like a light bulb moment for them. And that they went away from this session, and I was only with them for 45 minutes. I mean, I slightly went over, I'll be honest, but they seemed like different at the end. Like I sent them off with their pack of sanitary towels and tampons and their little handouts that I'd drawn them of a womb and of the external vulva, etc. But it was, oh, Charlotte, it was just so fantastic. And I'm in the process of offering this out more widely to schools locally, because really interestingly, and perhaps not that surprisingly, the curriculum in Wales, in the UK, is different to in England. So I mean, I won't go all into the detail of that, but it gives me a brilliant opportunity to try and support teachers, because what I realised really quickly is that, I'd kind of theorised that this was the case, but I saw that the teacher has to hold a really serious line. Okay. So she was like introducing, because I did do this session with just the girls.
Yeah.
And the boys went off to do something else. But she brought them all back into the class to explain who I was and what I was going to do. And as soon as she said sex education, like I looked over and two of these boys are like, and I just thought, Jesus, she's only said sex.
She's only said
Come on,
sex.
like, she's only said sex. Chill out. But they just don't know what to do with that. Bless them. They're like 10-year-old boys. Actually, probably 10, 11. Anyway, and she kept saying to me about, like, not being funny, and like, you've got to be really serious. And I was thinking, oh, miss, that's not really my vibe. I'm not really sure I'm going to be able to stand up at the class and say, right, this is the outer labia minora and this is the inner labia majora, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's just not really. So I didn't, Charlotte.
Yes.
And she wasn't in the class. I thought, I just can't, like, that's not going to work, because unless you can make them laugh, then they don't feel comfortable. Simple as that. I mean, that's how I've managed throughout my career, really, is that you have to get people on board, and you can't do that. You've got to make people feel comfortable. Like I do it at the start of all of my training sessions. But like, I've been to training sessions where, that online, where they're like first bit where everyone's arriving, and there's like these professionals, and they're like this. Like, and they don't talk to anybody. Oh my God. And I'm there like, what's everybody had for breakfast? Blah, blah, blah. Like trying to. So I did the same. Yeah, I did the same with these girls. And it was the challenge was because my daughter was in the class, love her. And I said to her, if you don't want me to come in and do it, babe, I won't. And she was like, no, it's fine, Mum. But don't do any mum jokes.
Don't do any mum jokes.
I was like, oh God, that's like my best material.
What's
babe.
a mum joke?
I think just anything that might have embarrassed her, which is like, to be fair, she I do embarrass her, but like, I think I was flattered that she wanted me to go in, or that
That's
she
really
didn't
special. She didn't
not want me
way.
to go. Yeah. And it was quite funny because I made sure that we all sat around a table in a circle, and she was sat opposite me. And at one point I started to say something, and she clearly didn't know what I was on about, and she was giving me this like, what face? This like, what are you talking about?
Instant feedback.
Yeah, but very quickly, like, we established the ground rules, and actually it was the perfect environment to do that in, because they all have ground rules in the classroom. So we're all in this circle, and I'm saying, right, girls, what are the rules? And they're all like, you have to speak one at a time, and you have to respect each other, and and I was like, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we talked about confidentiality and then we started talking about vulvas and the word for it. There was a little bit of giggling, and I got them all to say what words they use and what words their mums use, and so we had a right giggle about that, and I think that really made a difference. And then we did some stuff on anatomy, and that was gripping. Like, quite a few of them perhaps not surprisingly, like didn't know that we came out of a separate place to
Totally.
and I
Yeah.
just think that's like, you wouldn't have that, flip reverse it, like boys wouldn't think that we came out of their bums,
Yeah.
which is like the
It's
equivalent,
really,
isn't it?
yeah, I see it often in a first moon circle that they don't know they've got, for want of a better word, three holes. It's like they know where poo comes from,
Mm-hmm.
and then they think, oh, wee comes from the vagina, and isn't that where a baby comes from? And totally, like, they don't know clitoris, like that's like taboo. Clitoris. They don't even know what it is. They don't really
No,
know
that
the
was a
word
funny one.
vulva. How did that go
Oh,
down with you?
oh yeah. So they were like, they thought that we came out of the clitoris, and I was like, no, because actually the clitoris. Does anyone know what that is? And they were like, no. And I said, well, that is a spot that is designed completely for pleasure. Well, all these 10-year-olds' faces were like, I said, so, it's absolutely normal if you wanted to explore that privately because it's a part of your body, because it is there to feel nice, but absolutely you would be the only person that did that, and that no one else would be allowed to do that, particularly until you were after 16. And they were all kind of like, okay. but,
Green light.
yeah, I know, because
Amazing.
like, why,
Yeah.
like, and maybe nobody has said that to them, and maybe their mums are going to be in touch with me and saying, why are you why are you telling me? But I kind of thought, don't care, it's so important that they know.
I think you're
It was
amazing.
just
I'm like bowing down to you because I think it's like something that people really shy away from. It's like, we can
mm,
talk about vulvas and vaginas, but some clitoris is like suddenly
mm,
a lot more difficult. And then,
mm,
saying, oh, it's only functions for pleasure. Like it feels good.
mm,
Like if you touch it,
mm,
like,
mm.
it's yours, have fun kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Crack on.
crack on. I
Yeah.
remember being really like super ashamed of any conversation about female
Mm,
pleasure, like
mm,
as a kid and even as a young adult. Like it was like
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
nobody talked about it. Nobody
mm-hmm,
ever talked about it to me, especially as a kid. And it was like, you don't touch anywhere or anything. It's like, that would be dirty.
mm,
um and that's work I've actually had to undo as an adult. It's
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I just think it's crazy. And yet, everyone knows that boys have wet dreams and boys, masturbate and watch porn and whatever, and talk about it with their mates. And parents seem to be more open about it. I don't, it just doesn't seem to be a thing. But like girls experiencing pleasure, like, whoa, that's
mm-hmm.
really threatening and dangerous, apparently. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think so?
100%. And even now, in conversations that I have with like pretty awakened women, there's still a slightly giggly bit, isn't there, when you
Mm,
talk about
yeah.
sex or pleasure? It's like a bit
She said what?
um, yeah, but no,
Mm,
so that was a fantastic thing to get in. It was funny because I hadn't planned how I was going to respond to the clitoris question, but it just kind of happened, and that was cool. But some of the questions that they asked, Charlotte, I mean, I imagine you get this in your first moon circles, but it was just and at the end the teacher came in, and we were talking about like any questions and stuff, and that was it. She quite cleverly, actually, the teacher had been talking to the boys about the basics of what we were learning about, and asked them if they had any questions for me or her or the girls,
mm,
and said to the girls, if you feel comfortable, please answer the questions. And she came with a couple of questions, and this little girl just said, oh miss, we could tell them about the moon and the sun. And then Miss said, what's that about the moon and the sun? And then she got a bit shy. And then this other girl put her hand up and said, oh, Miss, it's just that the male, oh, it's making the hairs on my legs go up. Just, she said, Miss, it's that the male hormonal cycle follows the sun and the female hormonal cycle follows the moon. And I was
mm,
like, like if that's all they take away, I know. And because I didn't go into that in massive detail, but I
mm.
just mentioned it, and it sunk in. And I just thought, oh, it's just, and they were asking questions It's like, because we got the tampons out and dipped them in the red juice, which actually I must quickly tell you the story of the red juice, because I used Oasis. I don't know, do you have that in Australia?
No,
You
don't
know
get it here.
Oasis.
I know it, yeah, from home.
It's like red squash, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing I could find that looked like menstrual blood. And it's ironically my daughter's favorite drink. So I had it in the fridge in the morning. And I put it in my bag to take and realized it had been opened. And so she'd helped herself to a bit of the menstrual blood in the morning before the session. So I'd gone in and there was much less in there, bless her. But so we'd been dipping tampons in and, I was getting them to put sanitary towels on the period pants I'd taken in and getting them to use the moon cup to pour it on. And that was their favorite bit. They loved it. But they were asking questions like, does it hurt when you put a tampon in? And just questions that I'm fairly confident they wouldn't have asked the teacher. And asking, like, how much do they cost? How much do tampons cost? How much do sanitary towels cost? And then we got into a whole conversation about period poverty. And it was I just absolutely loved it. The challenge, I think, with schools is that it's about the funding. So, at the moment, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a whole thing in the UK about because of the economic crisis or the looming crisis, that they're questioning whether they've got enough money to run schools for 5 days. So they're talking about reducing schools to
Oh my God.
So there's me going, would you like a period workshop? It'll cost this much. So I can see how it's a difficult arena to get into, because how do you pitch that at struggling local authorities?
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to work out for ages, because in Australia you've got independent schools, like many more of them than I remember there being in the UK, and then you've got public schools, and independent schools have got funding and public schools don't, and what are they allowed to hire people to do, and what are they willing to pay for, and budget, and all the rest of it, and what trying to go in, and teachers have to. I get the real sense that, and from what the teachers I've spoken to as well, is that this is something they get absolutely minimal training on how to do and guidance. And it's like, figure it out, go in, you've got to do it, even if they don't want to do it, even if those teachers are holding their own shame, right? And then they're passing that on. Totally, especially in an awkward situation. If you're awkward, it's going to be awkward, school sex ed, like, unless you've got someone like you who's, empowered, and you've done all this healing work and like reclaiming work, and you're just like, yeah, this is it, this is positive and special. Unless you can go in, and I think it must be different as well for children when it's their own teacher who they've got an established relationship 100%. With, who's got to be serious, like you say, and then you get to swan in and be like, hey, I'm just gonna, completely different dynamic and relationship, let's just reframe this right from the start. It's so important. I think it's really important that the schools have the right people doing this, because it's not just part of the curriculum. This is life. This is fundamental. This is health and well-being. And we've talked about the impacts that not having support at this age, puberty age, has on us for our whole life. Like you said, the clients you're working with, the experiences they've had, now looking at the births they're having, and we know it impacts women, all through their life, and the choices they make and the healthcare they receive and how they feel about themselves, and blah, like it's just massive. It's like when you said life-changing, I always feel like this. It's like, is it true? Am I getting a bit carried away when I say like it truly impacts every aspect of your whole life? It genuinely does. That is not an over-exaggeration.
It's not. It's absolutely not. And I feel the only antidote to that entrenched, inevitable, pervasive menstrual shame is getting in there early and having the right people, having the right conversations with girls and boys, because I feel it's really, and I've offered and will hopefully do a session with the boys as well.
Amazing.
I think it's really important for girls to have that on their own, to have this space and this safety to ask those kind of questions. But I absolutely think that boys need to as well, because how are they going to support the women in their lives, whether that's their sisters, their girlfriends, their mums, their aunties, their cousins, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if they,
Colleagues.
if, well, and they otherwise, they repeat the shame. Colleagues, yeah, absolutely. So I feel it's just how you get in there, I think, is difficult. But you're right, teachers are not best placed to do it. And I think that they don't think they are either.
No, I just don't think there's any way around it for most school teachers, is there? It's like, oh, you just got to get on with it. But
Mm.
it sounds amazing. And thank you for sharing, what you shared and how it went and the details of that. It sounds like you covered quite a lot of like really important stuff in a short space of time that fits
Mm.
into the school day.
Mm-hmm.
Which is amazing because I think that's something that, we have to do when we're working with schools, isn't it? We've got to fit into what they can
Yeah.
offer us. But that's amazing. Like think of all those lives you've really, changed. And I think with children as well, and you'll know this, but from my experience, you said like you think maybe one or two had like this aha moment.
Mm.
I think that they're all changed. They're all, even if they don't show it, because they're quite good at
Mm-hmm.
keeping it, straight face. And it's, that seed is sown and the cogs are wearing, and it's they're mulling on it, and it's the change for them, the change for their families, the change for their friends, and that ripples out. It's big
Mm.
stuff.
It's magic
Amazing. I hope you
stuff.
get to keep going. I hope
Hope
you get
so.
paid for it as well.
I know. I
Because
do.
it's
I've pitched.
important
I've
work.
pitched, but it's not like what I should be
Totally.
charging.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't know schools were in that much trouble looking at going down to 4 days. Yeah,
Mm.
wow. Mm. Oh, I love that. I feel I feel all inspired. I've been I spent quite a bit of time trying to get into schools and didn't get very far, to be honest. And kind of gave up pushing
Mm.
for it really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel inspired to have another crack and
Oh,
just see
do,
see
because
what I can do.
it's got to be, and I feel like it's a social justice issue as well,
Mm,
because if you don't get into schools, then it becomes a privileged option,
totally. Yeah.
and then that kind of defeats the whole point.
Hmm. I agree. I really agree. And we see it with first moon circles. It's it's on some levels it's a shame, but we do what we can do, but and there's ways around it. But you have the children come whose mums are open to it and who can afford it, even if you offer like most
Mhm.
of our facilitators do offer concessions or even scholarships and things like that. But the mums have got to really go, yeah, I want that for my child. Whereas we need to be reaching all children, the ones who don't have the access, the ones who might not live with parents, the ones whose parents would never think of sending them to something like this. And like you say, when you do a school session, it's you're reaching across the board. And then the other impact of that is they've got this peer group that they can go
Mm.
through school with, which is,
Mhm.
for a lot of people, myself included, like I've got some really shitty memories of having periods at schools and
Mm.
like the fear that I had and, of leaking and all that kind of stuff
Mm.
and just
Mhm.
awkwardness and, getting changed and for games and things like that, swimming. Oh my God. But, if you've got a whole classroom of like period positive girls and boys all there like, oh yeah, this is normal, we can talk about this isn't like, she's got a period, is it that time of the month, is it shark
Mm.
week or whatever, like wow.
Mm.
It's big, it's really
It's huge.
big.
I just want to say one, you were just reminding me then when you were saying that, I just want to say something really quickly on period poverty, that in Wales, they're brilliant. So they put millions of pounds into providing free menstrual products for schools. And when I was working in schools as a social worker a couple of years ago, I remember going into a school in Cardiff, a primary, and
Mm.
seeing sanitary products on a display in the reception. And I just thought that was, and all schools in Wales, probably in England too, get given all these free menstrual products. But they just end up in a cupboard. And who's teaching the girls how to use them?
Mm.
That's the key.
Yeah, Totally. Oh, that's brilliant that those products are there and that they're visible. But like you say, it is those questions of, I see it time and time again. They know what tampons are. They know, some of them might even know what moon or menstrual cups are, if their mum's got one, for example, or pads, but they don't know. I sit there and show them, like, this is how you open it. This is how you would insert it. Like you say, put the pad on the pants, or, I even sit there and pretend I'm, with my clothes on, obviously, but, using a tampon or a moon cup, it's like, this is how you would fold it up. This is how you take the wrapper off. This is the way you would angle it. This is, and I pretend like I'm sat on the edge of a toilet kind of thing, and just try to be normal about it. But to show, and then get them to have a turn at opening all the products, because they don't know. They don't. And even if I'm sat there demoing, going, you do, you unwrap it like this, they actually need to do it with their own hands and have that familiarity and confidence that when the time comes and they need it, this is old news. Yeah,
Absolutely. That experiential learning. 100% agree.
Oh, I can feel your passion for it. So what's next for you, Hannah?
Well, I've got a few things in my cauldron. My books are open at the moment for one-to-one cycle sessions.
Listen up, peeps.
Yeah. You can access that at wombwisdom.uk. And I'm on Instagram at womb__wisdom. But I've got lots of exciting things happening. I really want to explore the schools option. And I've got some workshops and stuff in the pipeline. So it's super exciting. It's a really exciting time.
Are they for women or for kids?
For women.
The workshops.
Yeah, well, I want to do workshops in schools for kids, and I'm going to do some. Well, there's some in person, but some online workshops for women that I've got coming up as well. So you'll see more about that soon.
Beautiful. So if we pop all your links in the show notes, people can come and find you. And if anyone's interested in doing your menstrual story work with Hannah, with her cycle coaching, go check her out, because she's a beautiful, beautiful woman, as you can hear, and a beautiful space holder, and got so much knowledge and experience, and I know it'll be really special. So I'll pop that in there, and go work with her.
Thanks, lovely.
So is there anything you would like to add before we close? Any final piece of anything to add?
I think I could talk to you all day about this. I think we've covered quite a lot. I think the piece about reclamation, I think, is what I want people to leave people with. Like, what is it you'd like to reclaim? I think is the kind of question that I want to leave people thinking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. One to ponder on for sure. Thank you, Hannah.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you for having me. I've had such a nice time.
Yeah, me too. It's been so good to chat and to hear more about the work that you do. And I just think it's so inspiring. And I really love the way that you've fused all of your experience together. And I think that's what's so great about cycle coaching, is that, you really can do that. But you've got this really beautiful vision to help women to reclaim their cycles and reject their menstrual shame. Powerful stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for giving me the space to talk it through. Yeah, it was fab. Loved it.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle, so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.